Welcome to Mindful Moments with Dama and Mackenzie, a video series about progress, not perfection, in parenting and mental health. This free resource is part of our commitment to supporting families and caregivers. We reference evidence-based tools throughout with deep appreciation for the work of conscious discipline and other leaders in social emotional learning and positive parenting. All credit goes to the original creators. This video is for educational purposes only and not a substitute for professional training or certification. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Mackenzie Fisher. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in Kansas and Missouri. I am a registered play therapist, so my focus is on clients in the early childhood age group. So that's really where my passion lies, and I'm glad you're here.
Hi, my name is Dama Johnson, and I'm an MS Ed in Early Childhood Unified. I've been working in the early childhood field for 20 plus years now, and definitely focus in early childhood and early childhood social emotional learning. I guess that's it.
That's us. We're glad that you're here and that we can have this time to. This is kind of an interesting medium that Dama and I are diving into. We have both been teaching parenting classes for, oh gosh, Dama, how long?
For me, about 3 years.
Yeah, for me, oh goodness, 6 years. And it's always kind of been a thought that we should, have a more accessible way to get information to parents who can't join our in-person or virtual parenting classes. And, we've had parents who join our virtual parenting classes say, I kind of listen to you like a podcast. And so why not create something that you all can look back on if you've joined our parenting classes, or this is all new to you, you can jump on whenever it's convenient to you. So that's kind of why we're here. Damon, did you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think that is exactly what we have had people ask for, and just kind of an on-demand situation where you can listen to it at your convenience. So yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah. Great. So this video, we're really going to be focusing on kind of an introduction to supportive discipline, and also the research behind kind of what and why we're doing. What I love about this way of interacting with children is it's not just, someone decided, oh, it feels good to interact with children like this, or this is my opinion. This is research-based, brain-based stuff. So I really want us to be rooted in that. And so first, kind of talking about this traditional model of discipline, which focuses on kind of making children do what you want them to do. And really with that kind of exclusively rewards versus punishment, kind of dangling that carrot in front of kiddos' faces. Like, if you do this, then you'll get this. And if you don't, bad things will happen, right? To control behavior. It also kind of avoids conflict and views it as being disruptive, and is based on this kind of external need for control. Dama, what's kind of your opinions on why that doesn't necessarily work for all children? What are your thoughts on that?
Um, the external model, you mean?
Yeah, that
Asking about?
traditional, yeah.
Um, that external model doesn't work for children for a variety of reasons. It doesn't really work for anyone,
Yeah.
honestly. One of the things that really sticks out to me in the research around this is that things we learn using that external model through punishment and rewards don't tend to generalize to other situations. They become very situation specific. Yeah, we might learn to not say bad words in a certain scenario, but it doesn't necessarily stop us from saying bad words in other scenarios. We might learn to not speed through the speed trap, but we won't learn to not speed in other situations. It just doesn't generalize. The learning doesn't, unless it becomes more intrinsic and we really internalize it as something that is helpful to us in all situations. Also, it really relies on almost a people-pleasing model where you really want to make someone else happy. And it's just not always true that that is a motivator. for everyone in every situation, and it's not always a motivator for every child in every situation. Um, and without that, what we're going to talk more about, safety and connection piece, it just doesn't move into the integrated parts of our brain. We don't integrate that knowledge and learning. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, I mean, the traditional model really relies on fear. And where with some children and some temperaments, fear can be that motivator, but it's not because they've learned something new. It's because they're afraid of what potentially will happen if that doesn't. And I talk to parents all the time where, you know, where our first child, it quote unquote worked because they just happened to have a kid where the temperament was okay, like if, like, you know, I'm going to give up and kind of that people pleasing model, do whatever you need to get that approval. Second, third child rolls around and they're more of a fighter than a surrenderer. And it's like, okay, where we need to reevaluate some things. So we're going to kind of shift our thinking to more of that supportive discipline, which focuses on changing ourselves to influence others and building that through relationship and connection. So more of a teaching model versus a punishment model, and sees conflict as an opportunity to teach versus something that's getting in the way. And instead of relying on an external stimuli, we're using internal. So when I do this, I am helpful. So really intrinsically building up those skills for lifelong success, which is really cool. Anything to add to that, Dama?
No, well, just that when we begin to see what our impact is on our environment and on the people around us and on ourselves, it really builds that, like you said, internal motivation to continue to do certain behaviors. That impact is really important. It's something that we really want to focus on when we're teaching our children new skills. We want them to know why. We want them to have those skills, and why is because of the impact on their environment, on the people around them.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this shift from control to teach, it's really focused on the attachment between caregiver and child and how beneficial that is lifelong. We say that connection breeds cooperation. I'm much willing, you know, if Dama and I are connected and she sends me an email and says, hey, do you mind doing XYZ? I am much more likely and willing to be, you know, happily into that idea versus if Dama and I are in a state of disconnect and she emails me, hey, can you do this extra thing? I'm much more likely to deny that request, right? And children are the same way. So connection breeds cooperation, that connection over correction. Dama, do you think that that means that there's no consequences that lie within this kind of state of interacting with children?
Absolutely not. And I think that that is one of the primary things that people misunderstand about gentle parenting,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
why we focus more on a conscious model as opposed to
Mhm.
just calling it gentle parenting, because I think there's a big misunderstanding in that there are always consequences for our actions. There are consequences for every action we take. Within this model, sometimes those consequences are, we'll talk more about that later, but sometimes they're natural and sometimes they are things that are imposed by the people around us. So no, that's not true. What we are trying to do is minimize harm and trauma
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
children and to everyone in our environment. Our consequences should not cause harm. They should motivate, intrinsic motivation. They should motivate learning.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's important too because gentle parenting is such a huge buzzword that we see on social media all over the place, and kind of has that movement has kind of been taken over by more of a passive model to parenting. Would you
Mhm.
agree with that, Dama?
Absolutely. I think that
Yeah.
what I hear when I hear the backlash is that they're letting them get away with murder. And that's
Yeah.
not what we're doing. Well, not what we're talking about here. We're not
No.
talking about passive parenting. We're not talking about letting kids get away with doing whatever they want to do. We're talking about a model that minimizes harm and maximizes learning and mental health.
Yeah, yeah. I think a word that I like more for it better is assertive parenting,
Mhm.
and assertive interactions with children, where we ourselves can be calm and composed while offering guidance and teaching and direction. versus that passive, like you just do kind of whatever you want and run run the home and run the scenario, and that aggressive style of parenting where I only rely on fear to motivate your behavior. It's that in between where, and I think the really important thing is to have that in between. It's the adult being composed. And we say that, you know, a child can never be more regulated than the adult that they're in an interaction with. And so we'll talk about that, why that's so important. Before I dive into brain states, Dama, did you have anything you wanted to highlight on that kind of traditional versus supportive model that we're going to be shifting to?
Just to reiterate what you said about the aggressive versus passive, sometimes people forget that there is something else besides just letting them do whatever they want or get away with murder or run the show, and being aggressive and punishing, causing pain, causing fear and harm to a child. People forget there's something in the middle there, that it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be one or the other.
Yeah. And parents are left in limbo, right? Like this, okay, I know that I don't want to interact with my child the way that I was interacted with, but what else? You know, we cannot give what we do not have. And so I really do see this as the, you know, the in between and the learning, and so for some parents, reteaching themselves how to interact with others, which is tough.
And just to connect it to what we're about to talk about with the brain states, I think it's super important to understand how the brain works in order to understand why we have another way, why there is another path, and that we don't have to stay in limbo and be confused and not know what to do. Once we understand how the brain works and how our interactions with our children affect our brains and their brains and everyone around us' brains, then we can really see that there is another way.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to dive into that conscious discipline brain state model. Dama and I will be referencing conscious discipline a lot. It's the model that we use with teachers we work with, parents that we work with, and there's a lot of online resources that you can dive into on their website. And so the visual here for that brain state model is based off of the work of Dr. Bruce Perry. And so we see these three brain states. That first one being this survival state. So that's our brain stem right back here on the base of our skull. People call it the lizard brain. The only thing that we have access to in this state is that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. So fight, flight, and freeze, pretty self-explanatory. I can either fight you off, stick up my fist. I can run away, or I can freeze, dissociate, shut down. That fawn is more of the, like I mentioned earlier, that waving the white flag of, I will kind of do whatever I need to do to get me out of this situation, which if that means complying and going along with what you're requesting, then I'm going to do that. Does that mean that I'm actually in a state where I can learn? No, I'm doing it based out of fear. And what we know is that that compliance is not able to be duplicated, right? And we see this a lot in school, in the school environment. In the school environment, there's not fear that's being executed. So kiddos who are fawning at home are sometimes, not as successful when they're at school because that fear is not present. Would you agree with that, Dama?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd also say that what we do from the behaviors and the tools we have during when we're operating from our survival state are much more instinctual. They're automatic. They're based on our survival. They're there to protect us. That has a purpose. When we are operating from that part of our brain, it's to protect us.
Mm-hmm.
And emotional threats are just as threatening to our brains as physical threats. So, because emotional threats can become physical threats, so our brain reacts to them in exactly the same way. And it goes into kind of an automatic mode where it can react so that our brains can react really fast in order to protect us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, our brains are a beautiful thing. When, we're out in the forest and there's a bear coming after us, this fight, flight, or freeze will kick in automatically. And most of us know which ones we are. I'm a freeze person. My husband and I were in a car accident 5-ish years ago, and everybody was okay, but it was upsetting, right? And I couldn't figure out how to take off my seatbelt. I couldn't figure out how to open up my car door. We were down the street from our house, and when I, finally got my phone unlocked to call 911, I couldn't figure out where we were. That's that freeze shutdown. And so, we all have kind of different skills that we have, or lack thereof in this state. And when this state is used often, Dr. Nadine Burke Harris has an amazing TED talk about this, is that this survival state is great when we're in the forest and there's a bear. But she says, but what about when the bear comes home every night? And this system is flipped on all the time. What we use more, we have access to more. So this is where we see children eloping, running away, hiding under desks, physically fighting back. This is their survival state online. And so, yeah, it's stressful, right?
We don't hear a lot of verbal interaction during this time. It's mostly just screaming, maybe one word, no, stop, that kind of thing. But you're not going to be able to have a conversation with someone when you're in this state. Children, you're not going to be able to have a conversation with a child. They're not going to be producing much more than screams or
Mm-hmm.
completely silent during this time when
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
functioning from this state.
Yeah. So each state is asking a question, and our brains are really great about scanning our environments. And Dama had mentioned this earlier. It's a sense of felt safety. So especially if a child or an adult has experienced trauma, your red flags for what is not safe are going to be a lot bigger, than if there has not been trauma present. And so if my brain is scanning the environment and decides, oh, not safe, I'm going to be sent to this lower state of my brain where I don't have access to my skills. And so the need of that brain is safety. It's not the explaining why everything's actually okay, because we're not able to register that. So throughout this series, we'll talk a lot more about some responses that we can have in this state. Any other things to add before I move on to emotional state, Dama?
Just that we're not going to hear anything or be able to access any other tools or do anything else until that safety need has been met. So,
Mm-hmm.
or we're just stuck there until we know that we are safe.
Yeah. Yeah. Another way to think about this whole brain state model is viewing it as a car. So when we are in our survival state, you might hear people talk about it being in the trunk. Like we are stuck in the trunk. And like, Dama, what do we have access to if I were to hop in the trunk of my car? What would I be able to do?
Kick the
Yeah.
make a lot of noise. I don't, that's about
Yeah.
it. You can't do a whole lot from the trunk.
Yeah. Kick, fight, scream. I'm not able to drive my car, not able to see out, not able to access. So that's another way that we can think about our survival state. The next state that we have is this emotional state, and this is our midbrain. So you notice that we're moving up, right? And this is how the brain forms. It forms from top to bottom, and from left to right. So this is where our limbic system is, our emotional center. So some behaviors or things that you might see from the emotional states are maybe the whining, the blaming, that you're not coming to my birthday party, we're not friends, I hate you, this kind of verbal outburst of emotion. And really, like, what, Dama, can you share with us what is the brain asking for when it's in this emotional state that you're not coming to my birthday party?
Yeah, it's looking for connection. It's looking
Yeah.
for community. It's looking, do I belong? Do I have people here around me that will keep me safe? One of the things I more recently learned about the limbic system is it's where all of our sensory information comes in. And so it's the part of our brain that makes the decision about whether or not we're sending this info down to the survival state so that we can be protected, or whether or not we can, oh, I'm connected to the other people around me. I belong here. I have safety net. So I can go ahead and move up and start learning some new skills, which we're going to talk about more. But yeah, that part of the brain is the part that's making decisions about what we're going to do next, and what it's looking for is that connection. When somebody's whining about not having any friends in the classroom, what are they looking for? Or telling mom and dad about how they're being mistreated at school and they don't have any friends. They're looking for
Mhm.
connection. They're looking for community.
Yeah, yeah. And with that car analogy, the emotional state's that backseat driver. And so the backseat driver has a lot of opinions, but it's not able to drive the car. It's not able to use those skills to say, I'm turning left or right. It's only able to provide some strong opinions and emotion from the backseat. So we've got our survival state, and the need in our survival state is safety. And so we're in our trunk when we're in our survival state, fight, flight, freeze. In our emotional state, we're that backseat driver, that midbrain, we're seeking connection. Am I loved? Am I connected? And our third state is that upper brain, and it's our executive state. And Dama, will you share with us how old we are when this upstairs or prefrontal cortex is fully formed?
Depends on a few things, but
Yeah,
usually
right.
it's mid to late 20s,
Yeah.
25 or older.
Mhm.
It takes a long time to fully develop that part of the brain.
It does. It does. Yeah. And so I think a lot of times we'll talk here about, developmentally appropriate interactions with children, that we are expecting children whose brains are fully under construction to access those skills all the time. And I've seen amazing things happen when teachers and parents fully understand what is developmentally appropriate and what behavior is developmentally appropriate. And we're able to work with the brain versus against the brain. It's really like expecting children to grow wings and fly sometimes, when like some of us as parents, our brains aren't fully developed yet, right? And so asking children to always be able to access self-regulation and empathy, and the ability to make quote unquote good choices, we hear that a lot, is not developmentally appropriate when they're this young. So, but they have it, right? This executive state. And what the executive state is asking, what can I learn? So when we are talking executive skills, Nima, can you give us some examples of executive skills that live up there in the prefrontal cortex?
Um, Problem solving,
Mm-hmm.
conflict resolution, our academic skills all reside up there. So all of your, any academic skill you're thinking of, reading, writing, arithmetic, that's all up there. Our ability to organize ourselves, schedule things, and do things in a routine way, those are all gonna reside up there.
Yeah.
All of the skills that we want our children to learn
Yeah.
are up there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it is very typical for all of us, even as adults, to kind of fluctuate and bounce in and out of all of these states throughout the day. But really, we do have this high expectations of children to stay in this state of executive state. Even for us, sometimes we have that expectation for ourselves to stay here all the time, when that's not biologically possible. There's a
Yeah.
reason why we have all these other states. And I think the power in knowing is being consciously aware of, oh, I'm in my backseat right now. I am not up here in my executive state. And going along with that visual, the executive state's the front seat. I'm the driver. I'm planning on where I'm going to go. I'm able to see everything and make decisions for myself and for others around me. So again, behaviors that we'll see in this state: listening, problem solving, cooperation. And this is the only state where learning happens. And so if you have a child that is in their emotional or survival state, and we're expecting them to learn or to teach a different behavior, is that really going to happen when they're there? No. So, um, it's really important for all of us to, one, I think it's most important for us to be aware of what state we are in our interactions, because a child will never be in a higher state than the adult that they're having an interaction with. So if you're in your emotional state or a survival state, time for me to take a deep breath, time for me to learn some coping strategies before continuing this interaction. Because, I mean, what is the goal here is to give our children the skills that they need to weather the storms of life when we're not there every day. And there's no teaching going on when both of us are in our survival state, when both of us are in our emotional state. So hopefully throughout this series, Dama and I can give you maybe some ideas of what to do when you find yourself in your trunk or your back seat. Anything to add to that, Dama?
No, that's the hope. That's what our
Yeah.
goal is, to give you the tools you need.
Yeah, yeah. So Dama, why do you think it's helpful for adults who interact with children, or really just any adults, to know about brain states?
Um, well, I mean, I can only come at it from a personal perspective. Learning this stuff really changed how I interact with literally everybody in my
Mhm.
life. When you realize that you cannot have a conversation with someone who is not in their executive state. And when people start to fall down through the states, that the only thing you can really offer them is safety and connection in order to get back up where you can have a conversation. So
Yeah.
it's really super important that parents know this about children, because we're constantly trying to teach our children things all day long, every day. Almost every interaction is focused around, what we want them to do, how we want them to interact with their environment, and how much time we're wasting if we're
Mm,
not paying attention to what brain state they're in. We're wasting a lot of our time and energy.
yeah.
If they're not in their executive state, then all of that lecturing you're doing is
Yeah.
having no real effect. It's
Yeah.
in one ear and out the other. It's the peanuts adults in the background. Rah, 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 rah.
Yeah.
They just can't hear us and they can't learn
Yeah.
a new skill. So I mean, just on a real basic level, it's a time waster to not know about these things. Once you know about them, you become much more strategic in how you interact with people, much more
Yeah.
aware of how you're interacting with people. Yeah.
Yeah, talk less, breathe more. I don't know where I heard that, but I heard that somewhere.
Yeah.
I know as a preschool teacher, I spent a lot of time talking when I really should have been breathing and regulating my state, because early childhood, that age really relies a lot on co regulation. So that is, I mean, our brains are fascinating. Our brain's job is to decide if we're safe or not. And especially children, they will scan, this is all happening subconsciously, but scanning the adult in front of them to decide, okay, is this adult regulated or not? Because why do you think, based on survival, it would be helpful for a child to be able to, for their body and brain to be able to tell if the adult in front of them is regulated or not? Dama, what do you think?
Well, children can't keep themselves safe. Children
Yeah.
can't do that. Those adults in their environment are the ones who are feeding them, clothing them, keeping them physically and emotionally safe. And if
Hmm.
the adults in their lives aren't safe, then everything goes haywire. So they're constantly looking for those things in their environment. It's what our brains are designed to do.
Yep. Yep. So what do you think if an adult who's watching has kind of understood that, I go throughout my life pretty dysregulated, and I think my children are picking up on that. What do you think should be their next step, or what do you think a to do should be for them? A
I
suggestion.
think their to do should be to go through their own brain states, recognize when they are in different, really begin to recognize what state they are in any
Mhm.
situation. Just becoming more consciously aware is one of the first steps, I think, to this. And we're going to talk a lot more in our next session about some composure strategies, which would be
Mhm.
the next thing. But I think the first step to all of this is just recognizing the brain states and recognizing what state you're in
Yep.
and what you need to get out of that state. How do I find safety? How do I find connection? What do I need in my environment and in my life so that I can become a more regulated adult that can get up to my executive state?
Agreed. Yep. I agree. Okay. Well, so that's our first series or our first video out of this series that we have for you all. We'd love to hear from you. So if you have any questions, please leave it in the comments. If you want, us to cover something that we haven't yet, please let us know. And we're so, glad that you joined us today. Damon, anything to add?
I think that's it. Really
Okay.
hope to see you guys next time.
See you soon.